The day has finally come where we make Taameya, the best falafel in the world which comes from Egypt. It might sound like I'm biased, but this has been confirmed over and over again in competitions, and most evidence points to Egyptians inventing falafel. This recipe for falafel uses fava beans rather than the chickpeas you're probably used to. It's got a uniquely fluffy and light interior, as well as an extremely crisp exterior that will leave you wanting more. If you make this, I guarantee you will never look at a chickpea falafel the same way. Welcome to the 20,000 subscriber special. If you're new here, I'm Obi, a home cook who wants to get you cooking authentic and delicious Middle Eastern food at home. Today I'll show you how to make authentic Taameya, just like you'd find it at any Taameya stand in Cairo. We'll first make the batter and I'll give you the secret technique that gets it super fluffy. I'll show you how to shape the falafel and even stuff it, and finally we'll cook it and make a few sandwiches. Before we jump in, I just want to say a huge thank you to every single person who has watched the videos, liked, commented, subscribed and cooked the dishes. Making these videos has become a huge part of my life, and every week I look forward to sharing another dish with you. I can't wait to see where we take the channel this year, and I promise to bring you loads of great content in the future. So thank you for being a part of this community, and let's get right to it. We'll first start off by making the Taameya batter. If it's your first time making falafel, you'll be happy to know that the batter freezes really well, and if you make enough you can have falafel on demand. This recipe will make about 30 to 40 pieces of falafel, so you'll probably have lots of leftovers. The first step to making Taameya is soaking 400 grams or 14 ounces of split fava beans overnight. Like I mentioned, Egyptian falafel uses fava beans rather than chickpeas, which gives it the unique texture it's famous for. You may know these as broad beans, and though they are also sold canned, you'll need the dried ones for this recipe. Before soaking the beans, you'll need to give them a thorough wash until the water runs clear. Once you've done that, cover the beans with plenty of water and leave them to rehydrate for at least 8 hours. I left mine to soak overnight, and the next day this is what they looked like. The beans have swollen to twice their dried size and are now softer and more malleable. Drain them off and they are ready to use. Apart from the fava beans, Egyptian falafel is also famous for its bright green interior. It gets this from a combination of herbs, spring onions and leeks, all of which will be going into our mix. In Egypt we have a variety of leek called quart, and we use the entire thing including all the greens. I tried this with regular leeks, and while it tastes good, it results in a darker interior when cooked. Instead I use the white and light green parts of the leek. In total you'll need 100 grams or 3.5 ounces of leek, and you'll need to roughly chop it up. For the spring onions you'll also need 100 grams or 3.5 ounces, and we'll be using both the white stem and the green tops. Once again roughly chop this, as we'll just be processing everything together into a batter. Next are the herbs, and we'll be using 50 grams or 1 3/4 ounces each of parsley and coriander. I'm just cutting these in half to make processing the batter easier. To make the falafel mix, you will need a food processor which is capable of finely mincing the herbs and beans. I'm using my Magimix for this, which I think is the best home food processor in the world. If you don't have a food processor, you could probably do this with a high-powered blender, but I'd definitely recommend a Magimix if you're in the market for a food processor. I'll leave a link in the description box to this and a smaller model. Start by adding in all of the leek, spring onion, coriander and parsley, as well as 4 cloves of garlic. Now you'll add the beans to the food processor on top of the herbs. If your processor is on the smaller side, you might find it easiest to process the greens a bit before adding the beans in. Once everything is in, you'll let it run until all of the herbs and beans have been completely minced. This will take a few minutes, and I highly recommend that you stop the mixer a few times to scrape down the side of the bowl. When it's fairly processed, you'll add in the seasonings. 2.5 teaspoons of salt, 2 teaspoons of dried coriander, 1 teaspoon of ground cumin, and 1 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Process this further until it has been evenly mixed in and your mixture looks something like this. It should be a uniform green colour and have a texture similar to mashed avocado. This is the falafel batter of dreams and can be used immediately or frozen for 6 months. One delicacy that's made using Taameya batter in Egypt is stuffed Taameya. These are just like regular falafel, however they're stuffed with a spicy filling. The base of this is a medium onion which you'll chop into a small dice. The next ingredient you'll need is harissa. This is a really spicy red chili paste that is common to North African cuisines. You'll need 1.5 tablespoons of it for the filling, though if you can't find it, use any hot chili paste in its place. Now you'll saute the onion in about a tablespoon of olive oil over a medium heat until it softens. Once it reaches this stage, add in the harissa as well as a quarter teaspoon each of cumin, coriander, salt and black pepper. I'd also recommend adding in 1.5 tablespoons of red pepper or tomato paste to dilute the heat slightly, which I remembered to add a bit later. Once everything has been mixed together, add a small amount of water to the pot, then stir it into a sauce. Allow this to cook and reduce for at least 15 minutes until thickened. Here's what mine looked like after I added the pepper and allowed it to cook down. Keep adding more water until you feel your onions have cooked through and your stuffing resembles this. One of the other defining characteristics of taameya is that it is coated in a mixture of coriander and sesame seeds before frying. To make the coating, you need to add 1/4 cup of coriander seeds to a mortar and crush them just enough to break them open. You don't want to turn them into a powder, so once you can smell their aroma and they look something like this, you can set them aside. Add them into a bowl and then combine them with 1/4 cup of sesame seeds. Mix the two together until you have a mixture that resembles this, and then it's ready to use. The uniquely fluffy texture of taameya can be attributed to two things. Firstly, the fava beans turn into a paste when processed, which retains a lot of liquid, and unlike ground chickpeas, it isn't crumbly. Secondly, taameya batter is aerated and whipped before cooking. In Egypt, shops use a large mechanical pestle and mortar to whip the taameya batter into a fluffy and aerated mixture. Its texture resembles a mousse or fluffy omelette rather than the usual crumbly falafel batter. All of that incorporated air helps to keep the falafel light and fluffy on the inside. To get that same aerated texture at home, I use my stand mixer to whip air into the batter. If you don't have a stand mixer, then remove most of your batter from the food processor and allow it to run for a while longer. You can also use a hand whisk if you have one, and I think a blender will achieve the same effect. After 5 minutes of continuous whisking with my mixer, this is what my batter looks like. The texture is extremely fluffy and airy, just like you want it. Comparing the two side by side, the whipped mixture is like a soft melty gelato, while the unwhipped one is similar to a pesto in texture. If you aren't able to whip the batter, you can add 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda to each 1.5 cups of batter to improve the texture. With the topping and filling prepared and the batter whipped to a fluffy cloud, we can finally shape the taameya. In Egypt, the pros will shape the batter into hockey pucks on their hands before placing it directly in the oil. That results in the best shape and is really quick to do, but I don't blame you if you are worried about doing that. Instead, I'm taking a technique from frying donuts and I'm just cutting parchment paper into large squares. I'll form the taameya on these and then put them in the oil. I've set up my shaping station with the batter as well as the seed topping and a bowl of water. First thing I'll do is dip my hands in the water, then place a small amount of it on the parchment paper. This will stop the batter from sticking to the paper and allow it to release into the oil. Then I'm using an ice cream scoop to add a portion of the batter to the parchment paper. This is about 2 to 3 tablespoons of batter. Once it's on there, we'll give the batter a slight press to flatten it out. Don't use a lot of pressure as we'll still be pressing this further. When it's flat, wet the tips of your fingers in the water once more, then dip them into the topping. The sesame and coriander seeds will stick to your hands and you can now press them into the taameya. Once again, use a light touch. Now you'll repeat the same thing on the other side, and to do that take another piece of parchment paper and wet it like before. Place it on top of the falafel, flip it over and then peel off the previous piece. You can reuse it for the next taameya. Wet your hand and dip it into the topping before lightly pressing the topping into the taameya again. That's how you make the classic hockey puck shaped taameya. It should be about 1 to 1.5 centimeters or 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 inch thick when you're done. To make the stuffed ones, it's pretty much the exact same steps. You'll make a smaller patty on the parchment paper, then add about a teaspoon of the filling to the center of it. Once you flatten the filling out, add more batter on top of the patty. The two sides should merge together when you press them, then you add the seed topping. If you want to differentiate them from the plain ones, then just leave the topping off or use sesame only. I would recommend beating air into 1/4 of the batter at a time, then frying the prepared falafel immediately, because the batter does deflate quickly. To cook the falafel, you'll need to heat a good amount of vegetable oil to deep fry. My oil is about 2.5 centimeters or an inch deep, and you want to place it on medium heat till it reaches 160 degrees Celsius or 320 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm taking the prepared falafel and lowering it into the oil with the parchment paper. Hold onto the paper from the corner and you should be able to peel it off of the falafel. Once it's in the pan, it's really important to baste the tops of the falafel with oil, as that stops the batter from coming apart when you flip it later. Just use a spoon to splash the top with oil a few times. If you're feeling confident, you can make the falafel and place them directly in the oil like I'm doing. The key here is to lower your hand to just above the oil, then drop them in, trying to lay it away from you. Once your falafel have fried on the first side for about 2 to 3 minutes and have a light brown underside, flip them over against the side of the pan. If you want to make the ball-shaped falafel, these can be done by filling the ice cream scoop with batter, then scraping off any excess. Just release the falafel ball directly into the oil and let it fry. You can pretty much keep adding falafel until the pan is almost full, but make sure to leave some space to baste them and flip them over. You'll fry the falafel for 2 to 3 minutes on the first side, then flip it and allow it to fry for 2 to 3 minutes more on the second side. Once that's done, you'll give it 2 more minutes on each side until it's a deep brown in colour. When that happens, pull them out of the oil and allow them to drain before placing them on a paper towel lined tray. If you don't want to fry your falafel, you can experiment with baking them in a muffin tray, though be warned, I have no idea if it actually works and it definitely won't be as crispy. You'll know you've succeeded if your falafel sounds like this when they hit a plate. Now let's take a minute to observe the crispiness and check out the cross sections. You can't make taameya without making a taameya sandwich, so I've got some pita bread here which I showed you how to make a few videos back. Once I've split the bread in half, we can make a couple of sandwiches. I'll squirt a bit of tahina sauce in there, which I also showed you how to make last week. I'm also adding in a small amount of chopped tomato and cucumber salad. Then I'll add in a couple of pieces of taameya and some pickles if you're inclined. Finally, drizzle over some more tahina sauce. And that's how you make a damn good falafel sandwich. Whether you're a falafel expert or novice, I hope you give this recipe for taameya a try. It's taken my wife and I about a month of recipe development to put this together, and I personally guarantee that this is the real deal. You won't get taameya like this outside of Egypt unless it's made by an Egyptian. For the 20k, I've got a special guest for the taste test, my wife and chief recipe developer Salma.
Hi everyone, I just wanted to thank you all for your support on the channel. I'm so grateful to have this community and you've all been truly amazing. So a big thank you to you. Now let's try the taameya.
Let's. It's really good.
Takes me back home.
Honestly, I would say this taameya can give the best taameya in Egypt a run for its money. It's incredibly flavourful and fresh tasting, and then it has the perfect crispy exterior and a light and fluffy interior. You definitely need to give this a try if you're a fan of falafel.
You do.
Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like or comment. Thanks to our Patreon sponsors for making this video possible. If you want to join them, the link is in the description box down below, and I'll be back next week with another recipe.